If you see a missed call from someone named Diane Vale, break your phone. The phone didn't actually ring, that I'm sure of. I carelessly picked up my phone and scanned the notifications. Like all other normal human beings in North America, I check my cell every 15 minutes for that sweet dopamine rush that comes with the notification of a new text or Snapchat message. I was pretty surprised when I saw that I had a missed call from 20 minutes ago. After all, my phone had been sitting in front of me on the table the whole time, and it usually emits an obnoxiously loud notification ping anytime anything happens. The thought that I missed my ringtone of Natalie Imbruglia's Torn playing, "Leave Me Alone," I chose it half ironically, was surprising. I checked the notification, assuming it was most likely spam, and was surprised to see that the call came from my local area code and that it even had a real-life name attached to it. Usually, when I get a scam call telling me that Interpol has me on a watch list and that they'll lock me up forever unless I pay $213 via a very shady e-transfer, it's from a private caller. This time, there was a name. Diane Vale. Huh. It was still most likely a spam call, but I had been recently playing some modest gigs and opening for up-and-coming artists with my band, and I'd made sure to hand out my music business card, "Don't judge me," like candy at this point. I figured it wouldn't hurt to call back with this small, exciting but irrational, what if, thought in the back of my mind. And so I did. After a few rings, I heard someone answer the phone. "Hello?" asked the voice on the other end, sounding almost concerned, curious. "Is that an old lady?" "Hi," I said, weakly. "I'm calling because I think I have a missed call from this number." "From 20-ish minutes ago?" "Oh, is that right?" "Wow," she started, her voice weathered and hoarse. "Yep, definitely an old lady. I'm so sorry. I must have misdialed." "Ah. I forgive you," I thought to myself. Cell phones are a lot, even for me sometimes. As much as I wanted to take this opportunity to ask this woman what her experience with TikTok was, to see if the question would melt her brain, I figured it was good to end the call here. "Ah. No worries at all. I hope you have a great day." "Why, thank you, dear," she said, and before I could press that bright red icon with the retro phone handle to sever all ties with this woman for the rest of my life, she quickly squeaked in right after, "I was trying to reach my husband." Yes, that's what it was. He must have a similar number to you. "Oh, right, yeah. I imagined you were probably just off by a digit or two. Happens all the time," I said, still ready to hang up immediately. "Yes, that's what it was. I was trying to reach my husband. But I called you instead. Which means I wasn't able to reach my husband." "That is right, you wonderful sweet old lady. I think therefore I am. You called me, therefore you didn't call your husband. Logic. I will try him again now. Thank you for being so sweet and tender about this," she continued. "Again, no worries at all," I said, hanging up right after to avoid her throwing more mind-blowing revelations my way. Like if I was on the phone with her, that means I wasn't on the phone with someone else right now. Whoa! Despite my snark, at the time I thought the whole exchange was actually a bit sweet. That was the prevailing thought, anyways, when I saw her name show up on my caller ID a week later, to the sweet, sweet tunes of Natalie Imbruglia. Screw you, the song's a banger. I decided to answer. "Hello?" I said. Diane took a while to respond this time. She almost seemed surprised when she did. Wait, you're not Martin. Nope. I think this must be a wrong number. The revelation approached Diane at a glacial pace. Eventually, it clicked for her, and she answered with certainty. Ah. You must be the same woman I called last time. My, your voice sounds so clear. Yep, it's me again. Well, my goodness, you must be fuming that I accidentally reached out to you again. Not at all, ma'am. You're all good. Best of luck reaching your husband. Oh, well, it's not my husband this time actually. It's my brother I'm trying to call. Gotcha. Well, best of luck, I gotta run. I hung up the call just as she was mid-sentence through her response. I felt rude doing it, but at the same time, you have to nip things like this in the bud immediately before they drag out. If someone on a cold call or on the street asks you for 20 seconds of your time, be stern, say no and move on. It's the foot in the door technique, and I had to quash it before she felt empowered to share a series of boring stories with me. It wasn't until nighttime that same day that I realized it was pretty weird that she contacted me on another misdialed call, this time after trying to reach her brother. Did her husband, her brother, and I all have very similar phone numbers or something? I pushed the thought aside and moved on. And after 2 weeks of no misdials, I'd assumed that she'd moved on too. It turns out that the third time was the charm actually, and this time, Diane's reappearance was only frustrating and nothing else. I heard the tail end of my ringtone playing, "You're a little late, I'm already torn," at what must have been 2 a.m. in the morning. I got up just as my phone stopped ringing and checked who the call had come from. Motherfucking Diane again. Except this time it wasn't just this one missed call, it was 20. She'd been trying me for over an hour and I'd just slept through all of it apparently. I blocked her number and went back to bed. In the morning, I'd noticed that she'd also sent some voicemails. Out of morbid, annoyed curiosity, I decided to give them a listen. I expected to hear a mundane series of messages about her day, an incident at the bank, a complaint that oranges at the supermarket cost 20 cents more than usual, or her frustration that her husband and brother still weren't answering her calls. Instead, as I listened, every voicemail was the same. Breathing. Just her breathing. One voicemail after another. Continuous. Running for minutes each time before cutting out to the next message. Occasionally, it felt as if her breathing would rupture, like she was just about to start crying, but she never did. What in the ever-loving fuck? I wasn't sure if I should have been creeped out, or if I should have felt really bad. Regardless, I was able to rationalize all of this again. She clearly was just terrible with technology, and the line "leave your message after the beep" meant nothing to her. Never mind the fact that answering machines had been a thing for a really long time before the advent of voicemail, so she really must have been living under a rock to have missed all of that. I decided to run with my half-baked explanation for the purposes of buttoning all of this up in my head as quickly as possible. Thanks to me blocking her number, the next couple of months were business as usual. All was normal in my world. Yes, I would still get a strange sinking feeling in my stomach every time I thought about Diane's series of late-night calls, but overall the hustle and bustle of everyday life allowed me to put the incident behind me. Then, on a not-so-special day at a not-so-special time, my phone started ringing. I instinctively went to pick it up as I was actually awaiting a call from one of my friends at that moment. I almost had an aneurysm when I saw the name Diane Vale on the caller ID. My curiosity on how she'd overridden me blocking her number was quickly quashed when I realized that her number looked way different this time. It definitely wasn't from my local area code. She changed numbers to reach me? I answered the phone. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you, but stop fucking calling me Dash. I'm completely alone, she interrupted. Her interjection stumped me momentarily. I'm alone, she continued. I heard you. My husband, my brother, my family and friends, they've all passed. I have no one. I'm completely isolated. Look, I'm sorry to hear that, really. But that's no excuse, Dash. I just need someone to talk to. Please. Just one meaningful conversation, and then you won't need to hear from me anymore. God damn it. Okay, I replied. As weird as this whole ordeal was, seriously, calling a stranger because you're lonely under the pretense that it was just a wrong number? If getting her to talk about the heartache that comes with growing old alone and losing everyone you love was enough to put her at ease, then I could probably burn 10 minutes for it. Secretly, I was more frustrated at the potential kids, grandkids, or extended family that this woman may have had who'd left her all alone with no emotional or social support. Sometimes it feels like I've always been alone, she started. And yet, I have memories of a time when life was full. There was company, laughter, liveliness. I can distinctly remember moments where it felt like I had almost done too much socializing, where the presence of others was almost overbearing, if you could believe it. You don't say? Ah, in hindsight, what a strange, foolish thought for me to have had, she mused, her voice trailing off. I decided to multitask. I had a concert later in the evening, and I figured I could put her on speakerphone and start getting ready. I went to the bathroom, placed my phone on the countertop next to the sink, and started doing my makeup in front of the mirror. I'm sure that reminiscing on the past probably brings back some mixed feelings. I'm sorry to hear that you feel alone nowadays. No old friends or extended family around for you to talk to? I asked her. Nope. Everyone I've been close to has passed. Damn, that really does suck. I tried to approach the conversation from a new angle, while applying eyeliner. Might be a strange question, but is there any way for you to try to make some new friends, you think? Or do you have any kids or grandkids that you could try to reach out to maybe? I've tried, with my kids. No luck. They never answer. That's a shame, I replied. But on the topic of new friends, yes. Absolutely. I would certainly love to make some new friends. That's good, I said. But as I spoke, something felt off. I felt a chill going up my spine. Like something inside me, some inner barrier, had just been broached. It's a hard feeling to describe. I hope you can find some way to feel empowered, I continued, shaking off the weird feeling. To make some new friends, and to get everything you still can out of life. You should never give up on making your life a fulfilling one, you know? Even when the circumstances aren't great. Man, I was really pulling out all of the platitudes today. Never. Never ever. I've always been persistent. I've never been one to give up hope on having and maintaining a wonderful life. Not a chance. Not in a million years, she responded with conviction. I tried to focus on her words and the conversation, but I kept getting distracted. I noticed the strangest thing in the mirror, My free hand was caressing my hair slowly, in a really strange way. Why am I doing that? I returned my arm to its normal resting position and went back to dabbing on some concealer under my eyes. But every time I feel hopeful, I sink into sadness again. It truly is the worst thing to lose your family. I'm really sorry to hear that, I responded. I meant it. It was a brutal accident. We were all in the car. It was my brother driving. He'd had this brief moment of negligence. He was distracted in conversation and had turned his gaze away from the road. And it was at that same time that another driver in another car had a moment of recklessness. It was a perfect accident. Almost like the opposite of serendipity. Two momentary lapses leading to a terrible cosmic mistake. I was caressing my cheek. Wait. Why was I caressing my cheek? Yes, my skin is amazing, but I don't usually feel compelled to touch it like that. I brought my free hand back to its resting position yet again. That's fucked up. I'm truly sorry about that. And just so I'm following, that accident is how you lost your brother? Everyone. My brother was driving. His wife was beside him in the passenger seat, and in the back of the car, it was myself, my husband, and my sister. I mean, Jesus, that's fucking brutal, excuse my language. Like, I'm genuinely so sorry. I can't even imagine how it'd feel to survive something like that, and have to go on while losing the closest people to you, you know? No answer from her for a little bit. Just her breathing. Must have been emotional for her to recall all of that. I could sense that we were probably going a bit too deep, and at this point, I was ready to wind things down. I wasn't even sure if this conversation was gonna do any good for her anyways, and so I started thinking about ways I could wrap up this civic duty I'd undertaken. It's a void, she said. Yeah, I totally get that. Like, we probably don't want to get into it too much, but like, I've lost people close to me too, and it definitely feels like it's a hole in your... Where you end up when it all ends is a void. It's not at all what people said it would be. What? Also, my involuntary movements were really starting to wig me out now. It almost felt like I was suffering from a concussion or something. One minute I was standing up straight, swiping on some lipstick. The next I was leaning over the sink with my face nearly pressed against the mirror, staring deep into my own eyes. It was time to end the call. I'm really sorry to hear that, and I feel terrible about everything you've had to go through. I really hope you can find some peace and solace. I unfortunately have to go though, if that's okay? You know, she continued, my words breezing past her. When the crash happened, even though I felt my skull crack, and my spine snap, and blood fill my mouth, choking me while the rest of me remained a mangled mess, it still felt like I was alive for much longer than I should have been. It hurt for a really long time. And fuck that. I'm out. I felt a movement come from within me. I was pushing my hair back. But I wasn't doing it. But then I thought, when I'd finally crossed over, that I'd be connected with everyone again. We would all be together. But it wasn't true. It's just a void. It's darkness. A sea of it. And it's lonely and horrifying, and yet the hopelessness is paired with a strange vigor. A real one to return back to life. I went to hang up the phone. Why are my hands violently clasped together? Easy now, I can feel you. Stay on a little while longer. I'm almost there, she said. Oh fuck. I'm ready to move on from this. I'm ready to start a new life. Make new friends again. Walk down the street and hear the noise of cars and casual conversations. Company. Why do I feel like I'm about to pass out? Why do I feel like there's something blossoming for me? I am so thrilled you called back and kept answering, because I swear to you this has all happened for a reason, and I'm almost there, and I am almost completely inside of you, and you are so beautiful and young, and I can already imagine with real vividness the friends I'm going to meet and the new memories I'm going to make, and just the liveliness of it all, and everything, even through the pain, it all means something. I am utterly convinced about that fact. Her speech started to become more rapid, more intense. I could hear it in my head. I was trying to unclasp my hands and hang up the call, but I couldn't overpower it. Stay on just a little longer, dear, I'm almost there, and I feel myself taking over you, this wonderful feeling. I spoke through clenched teeth as I felt myself blacking out. Get the fuck away from my body, I growled. In an instant, something deep in my gut told me that I was only a few seconds away from losing myself completely. So, with a strange burst of instinct, I smashed my head against the bathroom mirror, breaking it. My hands were still clenched together forcefully. It didn't feel like her spirit inside me had weakened in the slightest. So I braced myself for more. What an unkind and selfish thing to do to my body, she shouted, but I cut her off by slamming my head against the wall. I did it again and again, but I could still hear her fucking voice croaking over the phone. I pushed through, this time making sure I didn't hold back. With a wind up, I smashed my head as hard as I could against the bathroom counter. It hurt like a motherfucker. As soon as I recoiled from the impact, I was afraid that I'd done some irreversible damage to my skull or my brain, but it didn't matter. I had a sense of vigor of my own. I'd rather be dead than have anyone else in my body. I felt her impact on me weaken ever so slightly, as her voice came through the call. You're a vessel, she said. Why can't you be grateful for that? I could feel myself on the brink of losing consciousness. I wasn't sure if it was from the head trauma I'd incurred, or if my spirit was about to slip away, but I pushed as hard as I could one last time. I stood up and brought my head down like a hammer onto the counter where the phone lay, knocking it, and myself, down to the ground. Amidst the excruciating pain and confusion, I felt the sensation of freedom for a few seconds. I leveraged the brief lucidity that came with the insane amount of adrenaline in me and crawled over to the phone. I tapped through the screens and notifications in an almost deranged manner. Just as I heard Diane about to say something else, I hung up the call. Jesus. Fucking Christ. It's fucking done. I screamed in place on the bathroom floor for what must have been a minute. I screamed even louder when I heard my Natalie Imbruglia ringtone play to signify another incoming call. Caller ID, Diane Vale. I hung up the call immediately, but it was interrupted by another call. Then another. And another. Diane was calling simultaneously from different numbers, over and over again, each call interrupting the previous one before I even had the chance to hang up. I ran to my hallway closet, found my toolbox, opened it, secured a hammer, and ran back into the bathroom. Without a second's hesitation, I smashed my Samsung Galaxy S23 to pieces. Even after I destroyed it, I continued banging the hammer into my bathroom floor, getting all of the bullshit and headache out of my system. And then I was done. I stood up slowly. The mirror was broken, so I could only imagine how bruised and battered my reflection looked. With the adrenaline subsiding, the insane amount of pain I felt over my body became ever more apparent. Like Diane had said, it hurt for a really long time. But I was still here. And it was probably time for me to go to the hospital. No concert tonight, probably for the best. I could explain to the cops later why I was screaming while trashing my own bathroom. It took me a while to feel comfortable getting a new phone. I still remember the puking sensation I felt months ago when I saw her name pop up again on caller ID, this time off my new ringtone, Electric Light Orchestra's Evil Woman. I blocked it, which is what I did with every other number permutation she used to call me as the months continued. The skin-crawling sensation every time she tried to reach me was always the same. But, thankfully, as time passed, her calls started becoming fewer and farther between. Maybe she was starting to make peace with the void. Or, alternatively, she was using that spare time to finally learn how to text from the great beyond. I got my first texts from her a few weeks back. "You are so unbelievably selfish. To string me along, give me false hope, and then back out at the last moment. I have a silent prayer that I'm holding deep in my heart, that when you do pass, you'll be in the same void I am. I'll have an eternity to inflict on you what I dream about in every waking moment. Diane." Sigh. Not even an XOX or a TTYL. She needs to brush up on her texting etiquette. At the time, I laughed and thought it was stupid. Lady, if we all end up in a void, and you've already been seemingly alone in said void for what's felt like an eternity, then it's probably safe to say that it's a big fucking void where you won't ever find me. That's the prevailing thought I like to keep, but every now and then I do sink into a bit of despair. Specifically, in the mornings when I wake up after a nightmare. All of my nightmares nowadays seem to take on the same tone. It's a regular-ass dream, and then out of nowhere, I turn a corner and off in the distance, the dream extends into a black void. And standing on the edge of the void, where the darkness meets my normal dream surroundings, is Diane. She's looking at me with an intense stare and a subtle smile, and she's waving. And for that brief moment, it all feels unbelievably real and vivid. The thing I hate the most about these nightmares is how my body capes sometimes. Every now and then, involuntarily, I'll catch myself waving back. I wonder if we're allowed to bring things with us into the afterlife. If so, I'd like to ask my loved ones to bury me with a hammer. The end. Next story. Has anyone seen the kids show Palace of Friends? As a single mother to a young kid, I've done a pretty good job of monitoring my daughter's usage of TikTok, YouTube, Roblox, etc. I know I can't be around all day policing her, but I want to make sure that she's safe enough. That's why limiting screen time with phones, iPads and the like is really important for me. Outside of a couple of hours where she can use some of those devices under my supervision, the rest of her fun time is reserved for watching kids' shows on cable TV. Yes, cable is in fact still a thing, and I've still got it. What I love about it, I can overhear it loud and clear, and I know exactly what the programming is. It's safe, predictable, and nothing like some of the more random and occasionally traumatic videos that end up autoplaying anytime Casey goes down a YouTube rabbit hole. When it came to TV time, I always prioritized channels that I knew would play hour after hour of kids shows back to back, to avoid a situation where something more mature would accidentally play. Most of the shows were super tame, kid-friendly animated shows, educational shows, nature programs, that kind of stuff. One that my daughter really seems to love is called Palace of Friends. It's a Sesame Street-style show with a cast of both animal and anthropomorphic puppets living in a large castle together. It seemed like a wholesome, musical show with some pretty good production value. Casey seemed to love it, and I could always tell when it was playing in the background. I was setting up for dinner the first time I heard one of the weirder songs from Palace of Friends. It was a song that was all about exploring the house, with the chorus mentioning all of the fun to be had under the sink. Weird lyrics like, "When mom's not around, you'll find a whole town beneath the kitchen sink." I had to shake my head at how stupid and potentially dangerous that premise was. As I came into the living room to call out the silliness and to tell Casey to ignore the message of the song wrapped up and one of the puppets started doing something akin to a PSA, saying, "Now, while there might be a town underneath the sink, there's also some scary stuff you shouldn't drink down there. So be careful." Well, duh. It was annoying to think of how big of an oversight this was on the part of the writers and creators of the show. I mean, really, what kind of moron thought that telling kids to go to the under-sink area when mom isn't around was a good idea? Rather than doing that weird PSA at the end, they should have just scrapped the whole song in its entirety. Jesus. As much as I wanted to take Palace of Friends off rotation after this event, the rest of the show was wholesome enough that I reconsidered. I took moments from time to time to see exactly what was happening on the show, and most of the time, the show featured activities for kids that seemed genuinely useful. One of these activities was called Draw Time, which is exactly what it sounds like, a point in the show where all of the puppets in the castle would gather around and motivate the viewer to draw on pieces of paper, get creative and have fun with it. While the characters on TV would draw along at first, most of the time they would just enthusiastically watch and cheer on as the kid viewing the show would draw. Really felt like an activity that would be good for my daughter's development. Even got a couple of cute drawings that Casey made of me that I could put on the refrigerator. The other wholesome thing about Palace of Friends that really stuck out to me was some of the more meaningful lessons. Beyond the standard treat others the way you want to be treated and isn't friendship amazing stuff that you see in these kids shows, it felt like they would sometimes dig a bit deeper. They had this whole story about this character named Friend who was too shy to come out and join the others, so he'd always hide behind a curtain. The other puppet characters on the show would always try to convince Friend to come out of hiding, but they would also, rather sweetly, choose to love him and accept him even if he'd never feel comfortable getting out from behind the curtain. There's this whole cute arc to the show about how the Palace of Friends would find the perfect special friend for Friend, to finally get him to overcome his shyness. Cute stuff. Though, pretty lazy on the writer's part to call this character Friend. Geez. I was pretty happy with the setup I had for Casey. It felt like I was giving her enough time with modern apps on her phone to ensure I wasn't completely silo-ing her from real life, while still giving her as much of a healthy upbringing I could for a 7-year-old in this age of technology overload. It felt like cutesy cable TV stuff was the perfect call, and that I'd done everything as right as I could have as a parent. That was, until the incident. I still feel ashamed about this. I've noticed that I sometimes use TV as a second parent when I feel overwhelmed with how much I have to juggle. Between work, raising Casey, and all of the chores and life balancing that comes between those two, having some me time is very necessary. I was getting lost in a novel when I first heard a series of thumps on the stairs. I ran immediately to see Casey at the bottom of the staircase, holding her leg and crying. From the TV in the living room, I was able to catch the last moments of the song that was playing on Palace of Friends. It went, "If you're brave, roll as fast as you can down the stairs. Don't be afraid, we know that you'll be okay." What in the actual fuck? I tended to Casey, and as I was checking up on her to see if she'd broken anything, I could hear one of the characters on the show doing what appeared to be another after-song PSA, saying, "Just remember, don't go too fast. If the stairs are really long, you could get hurt. It's always important to be very careful." Thankfully, Casey was okay. Palace of Friends was definitely off the rotation, which Casey was really frustrated about, but I had to do it. The TV channel that played Palace of Friends seemed specific to my area and public access. Why enough, despite the show genuinely looking like it had a solid production budget, and so I wanted to quickly put together a case for the show to be cancelled and for the channel playing the show to be held liable for the severe risk it was bringing to kids. At best, the folks creating this show were incredibly oblivious, and at worst, they were actively malicious. As I was starting out my case, I noticed something really weird. I'd found a new cable channel with kids programming that I left on for Casey, one that I'm positive didn't have Palace of Friends in rotation. There I was, working in my room one afternoon, when I heard the familiar sound of those characters coming from the living room. I wandered in to catch the final moments of draw time. On Palace of Friends. Lots of paper strewn around the living room, courtesy of Casey. Fun little signs and insignias and the like, and more pictures of Mom. I have to admit, she was becoming a better artist. As draw time wrapped up, the puppets on TV were all looking at the curtain where Friend was hiding and talking about him. "Maybe one day we'll find a special friend for Friend," said one of the characters. It was a pretty dorky catchphrase I'd heard a few times in the show at this point. As the puppets started breaking into song again, I turned off the TV. Casey was miserable, so my scolding her about changing the channel when I had strictly told her not to probably wasn't a wise move, but I just had to. She kept swearing that she never changed the channel and that her friends had just found their way back to her, but I called bullshit. Her TV privileges were revoked for a week. She had to learn the hard way. As a sanity check, once I'd condemned her to her room and forced her to find something to do that didn't involve screens, I turned the living room TV back on to notice that the channel she was on when I turned off the TV was the same new one I'd selected after banning Palace of Friends. It was odd that this new channel had suddenly pulled this lawsuit of a show into rotation, but whatever. At this point, I should mention, Casey's room does have a small TV in it. It's not a smart TV, and it's definitely not set up with cable, but there's a DVD player and a bunch of classic animated movies and kids show DVDs strewn about that Casey was free to put on at any time. So, you can probably imagine my surprise when, smack dab in the middle of the night, I heard the familiar voices of the puppets on Palace of Friends coming from her room. Beyond being frustrated that Casey was watching TV way past her bedtime, I was confused on how she'd managed to get cable onto the TV in her room, and, more importantly, why Palace of Friends was playing on TV this late in the first place. I left my room, turned on the hallway lights, and walked towards Casey's room. As I made my way there, I noticed bunches of crumpled up pieces of paper littering the hallway. More signs and insignias that I'd noticed before from Casey's other draw time sessions, but there were also more and more drawings of me. These ones looked a bit more demented than the usual ones that Casey had drawn for me. Almost felt like she was regressing as an artist or something. As I got to her room, I heard the following through her closed door. "This draw time is extra special. It's just for you. For being so smart and so brave. When your drawing is just perfect, it'll be enough for friend to finally get out from behind the curtain." I tried opening the door to her room. It wouldn't budge. I called out to Casey, but she wouldn't answer. I kept trying, pushing against the door, moving the handle in multiple directions, and eventually, out of desperation, trying to run against the door to break it down, but nothing was working. The show continued. "Do you know someone who is special enough to be a friend to friend?" I slammed against the door. "Can you draw that special person just right? In the special way we want you to draw them?" Huh? What in the world was this? "Casey! You need to let me in right now." My shouting out to Casey was interrupted by the sounds of all of the characters on Palace of Friends excitedly cheering. They started breaking into song. It was just one line, repeated over and over the backdrop of some very strange and almost tense-sounding instruments and arrangements. It sounded more aggressive than it should have. "You did it, Casey! You did it, Casey! You did it, Casey!" What the fuck was happening? In an instant, I ran back down the hallway to my room. I needed to grab my cell phone and I needed to call the police immediately. I couldn't think of anything else to do. As I got to my room, my light in the hallway turned off immediately, without me switching it off. I slammed the door behind me, out of instinct and fear more than anything else. The sound of the show coming from Casey's room was completely gone. A moment of complete stillness and silence in the house. And then, a violent knock on my door. Over and over again, I heard Casey's voice. "Mom, I did it. I found a special friend for friend. It's you." The knocking continued. It was much, much more powerful and aggressive than Casey could knock. Than any little girl could knock. As it continued, she kept calling out to me. "Mom! Mom! Open up! You're the special friend," with that same aggressive knock completely rattling the door. More worrying than the force of the knocks on the door was the fact that Casey never, ever called me Mom. Her nickname for me since she first started speaking was always Ami. In the dark of my room, I noticed something strange with the curtains. It felt like there was something behind them, ever so slowly inching its way out of them. The end. Next story. Me and my friends are using an Ouija board for the first time. It keeps asking people to leave the room. I'm using this post to chronicle the events of this evening, as they have been truly fascinating. Some quick backstory. The small section of the city that me and my friends live is generally known to be haunted. And even if you're not a believer in the supernatural, it's at least a bit eerie. I'm not going to dox myself by stating the location, but let's just say that creepy sightings and murders/deaths due to unexplainable circumstances are our bread and butter. For most people, this means you move away as soon as they can. For folks like me and my friends, who absolutely love all things spine-chilling, it generally makes for a pretty good time. Our Halloween parties are awesome. Most of our drinking nights have some sort of spooky game interlaced into them. And if you have literally nothing to do on a Friday night with your friends, you can always go on a tour of some of our haunted locales, graveyards, abandoned buildings, creepy forests, you name it. So, with that background established, let's cut back to tonight. Me and my closest 3 pals decided to try our hand at using a Ouija board. Were we going to be normal and try the Ouija board in one of our family attics? Nah, too basic. We instead decided to trek up together to, what I shit you not, is an abandoned treehouse left in an elevated section of our city, surrounded by forests. What could go wrong, right? We climbed up to the treehouse, sat down a spooky-themed rug, lit some candles, and brought out the Ouija board. Despite my pretty extensive resume of dealing with all things creepy, I'd never actually tried a Ouija board before, so I was really excited to see what would happen. We went into this excited to break every rule in the book. We weren't going to do a seance. We were going to ask whatever we want, and we didn't need to worry about being respectful to the spirit, etc. We figured if something interesting were to happen, it'd be more likely if we went in as carefree as possible. We sat in a circle around the Ouija board and got started, asking the simple question, is there a spirit with us, with all of our hands placed on the planchette. No real response. We fluttered the planchette in a few different directions, but we could tell we were kind of forcing it. We asked a few other questions, what is your name, when did you die, etc., but nothing really came of it. After trying for the next half hour and not really getting anything in the form of a response, we decided that we probably didn't have any spooky luck tonight, and opted instead to share scary stories in the treehouse. We left the Ouija board out just in case we'd get luckier later in the night. Amidst a break in our storytelling where everyone was grabbing drinks and snacks from their bags, I decided to give the Ouija board another quick go. I placed my hand on the planchette alone and whispered the following question, will you please grace us with your presence tonight? Surprisingly, the planchette started moving. It's hard to explain, but you kind of know when something is moving on its own, versus you sort of subtly and subconsciously moving it with your hand to force an answer. This felt real. A tingle went up my spine. It was cool as hell. My hand was moved to the following letters. Y-E-S. Awesome. I looked over to the group and told them that the Ouija board was working again. Excitedly, we all huddled around and placed our hands on the planchette. I followed up with another question. Where are you from? We sat there excitedly waiting for something. Instead, nothing. The planchette was still. The lack of any sort of external force with us was very, very obvious. Disappointing, but I had an idea I wanted to follow up with. I turned to my friend Kevin and asked him, do you want to try doing it solo? It worked for me. Kevin was confused, but he decided to give it a try. We all backed up to give him some space with the Ouija board. He placed his hand on the planchette and repeated my question, where are you from? His expression changed to shock as his hand started moving with the planchette. He turned to all of us and mouthed, I'm not doing this, to which I excitedly mouthed back, I know. I pulled out a notepad and recorded the answer as the planchette went from letter to letter. I recorded the following. N-O-T. I-M-P-O-R-T-A-N-T. Love it. A spirit with some sass. I asked Kev to back up for a sec as I approached the Ouija board, prepped for one final solo question. I asked, why are you only responding when it's one of us using the board? Yet again, the planchette moved effortlessly with my hand. It was faster this time, so I said the letters out loud and had another one of my friends, Eleonora, transcribe onto my notepad. The answer was ONEATATIME. Fair enough. I thanked the spirit, my hand still on the planchette. I appreciate your answers, friend. To my surprise, in a strange synergy between me and the spirit, I felt compelled to move the planchette again. It was the fastest it had ever been this time as it covered the following letters: TELL, EVERYONE, ELSE, TO, LEAVE. Huh. My friends looked at me skeptically as I said the letters at a time. Are you sure you didn't just force that on purpose? Asked Eleonora. I assured her I definitely didn't. That was definitely from the spirit. At this point, this had been the most clearly supernatural phenomena I'd ever experienced in my life, and I was excited to keep it going. My friends, usually unflinching and made of ice, were a little bit thrown. Eleonora and Martin looked ever so slightly spooked, but Kev was willing to go with it. Might as well see where this goes, Kev said, as he started climbing down from the treehouse. With a slight bit of hesitation, Eleonora and Martin followed suit. Sweet. An actually creepy night. I embraced the quiet amidst the lighting of the candles and the power of the Ouija board. I geared up for my next question. I wasn't going to hold back. Spirit, how will I die? I took in a deep breath, waiting for some movement. Slowly. DEPENDS. Interesting answer. If not a bit underwhelming. I geared up for my follow-up. Oh, come on, Spirit. What about something a bit more specific? My hand moved with the planchette to the following letters. I tried hard to focus and connect the letters since I didn't have anyone to transcribe with me. WHAT IS YOUR NAME. Weird. Completely dodged my question and asked me my name. Okay, all-knowing spirit, I assumed you'd already know that. I decided to try tricking it. My name is Belle. Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. It took me to the letters. DO NOT LIE HM. Well played, Spirit. I gave the spirit my actual name, Jennifer, and continued to see the follow-up response. WHAT IS YOUR FAVORITE FOOD. Honoring the spirit's rules, I opted to tell the truth instead of following up with another lie. Your girl loves Don Air, and this spirit deserves to know that. The Ouija board's response. CORRECT. Before I could take in the affirmation from the spirit, who was asking who questions here, Spirit, it followed up with yet another question. YOUR BIGGEST FEAR DO NOT LIE. This question took me aback a bit. I wasn't really afraid of anything, or so I thought. So I struggled with it. It took me a few moments. I really thought of it. I kind of cringed at the answer, but it was my truth. Something horrible happening to my little brother. No movement from the Ouija board. Seconds turned into minutes as I kept my hand awkwardly placed on the planchette. Then, finally, THANKYOUSENDELEONORA. Well, I obliged. I thanked the spirit for its time and decided to climb down from the treehouse, where my friends were waiting. I passed on the spirit's message, and told Eleonora that it was her turn. Martin, Kev, and I spent what must have been 15 minutes standing outside the treehouse while Eleonora was up there. We'd pulled drinks out of our bags and were discussing my experience with the Ouija board so far. Both were incredibly surprised when I told them that the spirit was asking me questions. What kinds of questions? Generic stuff, like my name, favorite food, etc. I answered. Weird. Both Kev and Martin seemed a bit thrown off by it, but I was excited. We looked up at the treehouse as we heard the sounds of someone climbing down. Eleonora had finished her session. She looked traumatized. How was it? I asked her. Weird. All it did was ask me questions. Questions like, Kevin asked her. My name. My favorite hobby. My, biggest fear. That one took me a while to answer. Kev turned to me. That is a little bit eerie, he said. I agreed. Didn't look like Eleonora was loving it either. But still a spirit asking us questions? This had been one of the coolest, if not the coolest, paranormal experiences I'd ever experienced in my life. Eleonora turned to Martin. It said that you were up next. Martin's session seemed longer than the others. We stood outside, drinking, talking about the happenings so far, and pulling out the occasional snack. That was a little bit traumatizing, said Eleonora. Kevin pointed to her, and then up to the treehouse. Agreed, this is kind of messed up, he said. Yeah, but that's the point. I responded. We seek out spooky happenings all the time and we never get lucky. This is an actual legit supernatural experience. I feel like we have to take advantage of it. Even if it's asking us personal stuff. What does it want this info for? Followed up Eleonora. I shrugged. While the biggest fear question was pretty weird, I didn't feel too worried that a spirit knew my favorite food was or what my name was. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of someone climbing down from the treehouse. Martin had finished up his session. It felt like it had been 30 minutes, which topped the rest of our sessions. We bombarded Martin with questions as he reached the ground. He looked more shell-shocked than Eleonora did. That was pretty fucked up, he started. What did it ask you? I asked enthusiastically. My biggest fear, Martin responded. It's weird, but it felt like it didn't like my answer to that one. It almost seemed annoyed. Huh, so was it just silent for a while after that? I asked. No, it asked me way more things after that. What the happiest moment of my life was, who I was the most jealous of, what my biggest life dream was, all that stuff. It was a lot of questions. Then, finally, it just wrapped up with thank you and that was that. Martin turned to Kevin. You're up next. Kevin turned to all of us. Here goes nothing. He sighed and started climbing up to the treehouse. We watched him make his way to the top. For the first time in the evening, I had a knot in my stomach. Only 5 minutes had passed since Kevin first went up, but he was already climbing down. He was shaking his head as he made his way down the ladder and to our group. Fuck that, said Kevin. What happened? We asked him. He just shook his head. That shit is dangerous. We need to get the fuck out of here, ASAP. I'd never seen Kevin like this. He was uncharacteristically shook. You have to tell us more. What did it ask you? What did it say? But Kevin ignored all of our questions. He started packing up his bag. You guys can play with fire if you want, but I'm out of here. I suggest you guys come too, he said. I watched as Martin and Eleonora started packing up as well. I had bad feelings throughout this whole thing. I think we should leave, said Martin. Guys, what the hell? Just cause it's unsettling doesn't mean we have to pack up. We can just hang out up there and do something else, I said back. This doesn't feel right, said Eleonora. I watched them as they all took a few steps away from the treehouse and towards the forest. You coming? Asked Kevin. I stood my ground. Kevin just shook his head and started heading out on his way. Suit yourself. I had no idea what could have possibly happened up there that would have shook him this much. He had already started walking as Martin and Eleonora pleaded with me to come with them. I said no. Begrudgingly, they all left. You're probably wondering, wasn't I scared? Especially now that I was alone? The answer was yes. But something in my soul told me that I was up next. I'd spent my whole life waiting for something that was truly supernatural to happen, and now it was in front of me. With my fingers jittering, I climbed up to the treehouse as my friends departed. It took me a moment to pull together the bravery to put my hand on the planchette. The candles were still lit. The setting was just right. Finally, I spoke to the spirit again. Why are you asking us all these questions? Nothing, for a few minutes. Then, my hand moved with the planchette, slower than usual. The answer. TOCONFIRM-MY-SUSPICIONS. Confirm your suspicions of what? Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. ONE. OF. YOU. IS. NOT. WHO. YOU. SAY. YOU. ARE. What are you talking about? I heard blood-curdling shrieks coming from the forest outside the treehouse. Like nothing I'd ever heard before. What the fuck? The planchette was moving on its own now. I watched it go from letter to letter. THAT. IS. NOT. KEVIN. HE. IS. COMING. BACK. FOR. YOU. RUN. And so I did. The small section of the city I live in is generally known to be haunted. I think I know why. It's time for me to leave. The end.